Everybody, I am really, really excited to have a super special guest on the channel today. This is a person who I've mentioned before, incredibly influential in me starting not only my whole returning retro adventure, but also YouTube and having the confidence that I can do it. She's been very encouraging for me. This is the one and only Laura Malvoyante. Welcome to the channel. I am so glad I was able to finally convince you to come on.
Thanks, Jake. There was no convincing, honestly. He's lying. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I am. I am. No, you can say yeah, I am. No, Laura, she's been awesome. It was more of a scheduling
Yeah,
thing than
there's a
anything.
time difference between where I'm at and Jake's at, so we finally were able to link up, and we have a subject that we really wanted to cover together, I think.
Yes, very much. So I would like to dive kind of right into that. So we're gonna go over a video that is it's good in a lot of ways, but also puts out a lot of bad information as well that Laura and I both felt like it might be kind of fun to go over together. But leading into that, the main topic today I wanted to discuss specifically with you, Laura, is intentional tech and what a lot of people seem, specifically content creators, influencers, seem to be getting wrong about intentional tech. And so I thought maybe we could start a little bit with your journey because you kind of found yourself gravitated towards digital minimalism, but then recently over the last couple of months, you've kind of found yourself almost experiencing a bit of a shift. Could you talk about that a little bit? What that's been like for you?
Yeah, so in September of 2023, I kind of hit a burnout, as I guess you could say, with smartphones and my usage. I was using about 8 to 10 hours a day, and I knew something had to change. And I kind of went into digital minimalism without realizing what exactly it was. Once I read the book, Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, I kind of put a name to what I was doing at that time period. And I went pretty hardcore, as you can see from my channel, into digital minimalism. And it got to a point where it wasn't really sustainable in my lifestyle. I am visually impaired, so I do rely on tech a lot to do certain tasks. And I had a trouble internally balancing being digitally minimalist and deciding which devices needed to be in my life. And it got a bit overwhelming. And in the end, I found that it's okay to use technology, but you need to use it in a more intentional manner. This means the devices, of course, but also the software that you're using, the services that you're using, and just having more awareness of everything to do with technology. And I found that is not only more sustainable, but also more realistic in modern times. And so, yeah, I've kind of shifted more to intentional tech. And I think it's more aligned with what the general population could probably learn from and implicate in any device they use.
I 100% agree. And I think I kind of had on my own journey, even journey itself is kind of becoming a cliched word. I don't
It
know if you
is.
feel that way, but
It is.
uh,
We need another word besides journey. I don't
I
know.
mean, I've used the word
Adventure.
adventure.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, maybe I think I'll keep using that until it itself becomes cliched.
Yeah.
But yes, it was kind of similar to me. I think very different circumstances. For me, I can still remember I was up in my room and I had I don't remember if it was like the phantom vibrate where I could have sworn my phone, but I don't know if it was that, Laura. I think it was just my on repeat brain was like, check your phone, check your phone, check your
Yeah.
phone, pull it out, unlock it, go. And I just started, like, I think I went into Instagram and just started kind of doom scrolling automatically. There was no reason. I wasn't looking for anything. I hadn't received a message or a notification. And that was a big eye opening experience for me because it was like my technology almost had a hold on me or control over me. So talking of about intentional tech, in my observations and in my I guess experimenting with different devices and different software, which intentional tech very much covers both of those areas, I've noticed there's quite a bit of a difference between intentional tech as a whole and the more digital minimalism path. And watching these devices and apps, websites, software in general become a little bit more in the public eye, we're starting to see the tech influencers talk about this a little bit, and they get a lot of things wrong. And I don't think it's always necessary maliciously or with ill intent. So one thing I wanted to start with before we jump into the video, I'm curious, in your observations, what do regular YouTube or content creators or influencers kind of not really in this space, this intentional tech space, tend to get wrong about this space?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I actually went through and watched all of the major reviews for the Lightphone 3 as well as the Minimal phone. And I only found that one influencer actually got it kind of on the head, what it was about. But the general gist of the problem of big influencers, especially big tech influencers, talking about the digital minimalism sphere or the intentional tech sphere is that it's a discipline problem when you're using your smartphone too much. It comes down to is you don't have enough willpower or you really just don't want it enough. And they're kind of ignoring the whole fact of addiction. And if it were so easy to manage addictions with willpower or discipline, it wouldn't be a problem. There would be no addiction in the world. And they're all missing that key point. And Mr. Mobile actually got it right. He did address the issue of addiction and how devices are designed to be addictive, and it's not our fault. And it's really up to us to find a device that could really be more intentionally used. And I think there are a lot of new devices coming out. Of course, their job is to review those devices as big tech reviewers. And I think when you review a device, especially at that level of influence, you need to take a step back and realize who the device is designed for. Of course, it's not designed for these people, but they need to take a step back and say, okay, Lightphone creates a device for which audience? Okay, people who want to spend less time on their phones. Why would people want to spend less time on their phones? Is this just a fad? Is this just something people want to spend more time with their kids? Or is this something they can't control? I mean, there are a limited amount of people this device could be applied to, and they're kind of missing it. And it's strange to me.
And I think that it also, in many ways, and again, I have to preface this with, and even the girl whose video we're going to go over, I don't mean this to be any kind of a attack in any way, shape, or form, but rather, okay, let's get things right. Let's make sure that the good information is getting out there. So more like a constructive criticism, so to speak. But I'm glad that you said this. The audience that a lot of these big influencers have, honestly, probably isn't going to be looking for these types of devices that they are talking about, devices or software apps that they're talking about, not necessarily exclusively, but I wonder too if you kind of get a little bit of they're making their content for their viewers. The problem is there's a lot of people I find curious about this space that are going to get information from where the information sources are. And so I think that in this case, the term influencer is very apt. So I don't fault him for that. And the other thing I feel is sometimes I think they just get in a bit of a hurry. For example, the one that we're going to watch here in just a second, I feel like if she would have spent a little bit longer with the Minimal phone, she would have realized, oh, this thing I put in the video was wrong. But anyway, so do you want to just jump over to the video or?
I think we can just head into the video. There's so many topics that are addressed in the video that we can definitely spin off of and give our opinions of what could have been done better, or maybe was left out, or some things that could be good. I did write some good comments down as well.
Perfect. So let's see if I can. Okay. So admittedly, Laura, this was the first video of Becca Farsace.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to. I don't know how to. She just goes by Becca most of the time. I think I never heard her say her family name.
Okay. So this was my first video of hers that I watched, and overall the video itself, I think she does a great job.
She does
there's
a great
just a
job.
bit of there's just a bit of information disconnect. But you, I think, have maybe followed her a little bit more closely.
Yeah,
certainly
I
more
used to
closely
follow
than I have.
her on The Verge. She used to work for The Verge, and she left
The
last year.
Verge.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, last year. Okay, so that's fairly okay. So Becca does a video here, titled "Are Minimal Phones a Scam?" which I could even go into that title. But I'm not going to go into
Me
the
too.
where she breaks down some stuff. So let's just dive in, and at any point, tell me to pause it. I've got a couple of spots where I have some thoughts, but here we go.
All right, so if you're like me, you spend way too much time on your smartphone despite thinking that most modern smartphones are pretty damn boring, but you're too afraid to live without one because, wait, why are we scared? See, this is what led me to spend $600 on a Lightphone 3. I'm Becca, I take tech outside.
Also, real quick, Laura, do you actually, do you have a Lightphone or Lightphone 2?
I ordered one. I have a Lightphone 3 on the way this summer, potentially, but I don't have a Lightphone 2. It was never made for the global market in the end. I feel like it doesn't work here. Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because Lightphone is, okay, for some reason I keep thinking Light's from the UK, but they're a US.
No. Yeah, they're based in New York.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for 2 weeks, this was my daily driver. It's a cool-looking minimal device that lets you do all the phone stuff, calling and texting for the most part, but doesn't allow you to access social media or even email. But all of you had this to say about that device.
Okay, this was a stopping spot that I wanted to do.
Yeah,
that I didn't,
yeah, exactly.
didn't
I
talk
wanted
you
to
about.
talk about this as well.
Okay, this is something that I feel like she and many viewers do make a really good point. I know some companies, because I've talked to them recently, do not think that intentional tech should have such a high price barrier to entry for people.
But I want to come into Lightphone's defense, because they did release it last year on pre-order for $399. And I think that was the sweet spot. I think that was where the spot they should have stayed. And going up to this price is obviously unrealistic, and every big influencer from Marquise Brownlee to Linus Tech Tips has said that this is way too expensive because of the flagships for Android, for example. They're reaching the Android level flagship price range, and I agree, that's too high. But now, Marquise tried to say that it is a boutique company with low volume, and he did try to really defend why the price is what it is. So he did try to understand it and explain that, but Becca did not go into that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that what a lot of people don't necessarily right off the top, because again, I don't want people to like jump in the comments and be like, "Well, Jake, manufacturing. Like, I understand, even not so much it being a boutique company, it being a very small company with a very small with very limited resources. The manufacturing costs are a very, very real concern. So I do understand that. My point here is, like you said very well, this I don't think that this is sustainable. You're not going to get people to, I mean, $600, you can get a year-old like Galaxy, S whatever Ultra for $600, and it's a super phone, a super device. So that's going to be really hard. People looking for intentional tech to help combat addiction or just to be less distracted and more purposeful in their day-to-day. This is a tough price point. Mm-hmm.
Also,
exactly.
I want to say for the other companies, they are harvesting and selling your data, so they are able to sell at a lower price point than some companies like Light. So that is also another aspect people aren't seeing or not understanding.
That is an excellent point. Point.
And you're not wrong, that's a lot of money for this little guy. So last week I set out to find some cheaper minimal options, and it all started at Best Buy with the Nokia 2780. I got it open boxed for
$71.99.
It's one of the cheaper minimal phones that you can put any.
Have you ever used the 2780? I know that you did. You use the
Barbie phone? Yeah. So the Barbie phone, there's a bit of a difference though from the European model to the US model. I think HMD is really leaning into the digital minimalism market now. They understand that there is a market here, and they're trying to really market towards digital minimalist.
Some of their phones I've seen announced, I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. But then it's like got one feature that I would like, and then so many that where it's like, okay, yes, this really is a digital minimalist device. I actually picked a couple. There was someone locally here selling a couple of these that the lady had gotten for her kids, and then a little while in, she discovered that they have YouTube and I think maybe a browser, and so I haven't had the chance to really play with them. I tested one just to make sure that it worked with my sim and whatnot, but this is also
you're
one
a
that
hardcore addict. This is what happened with me with the Nokia 6300 4G. you will go into YouTube, you will go into the browser, and you will find the things you're not supposed to find, even if it looks like crap. And it's very frustrating. When you're addicted, you don't care. You will find a way.
Right.
You will download unnecessary apps like Becca shows in here for the dad jokes. I mean, you'll find yourself downloading apps that you don't need.
And that's and Laura, what you just said right there is such I would call it a core tenet of returning retro. Tech convincing you to do stuff, spend time on stuff that you do not need, to the point that you start doing it compulsively. And that's where the addiction comes from.
Yeah.
So very, very good call out.
Carry your SIM into. It runs what's called Kai OS with Google Maps and YouTube pre-installed, plus there's a web browser for running the absolute worst experience of the web. Hardware-wise, there's USB-C, a headphone jack, plus a 1,450 milliamp hour battery that gets me about a day and a half of use. Oh, and terrible build quality.
Okay, something's not right.
I mean, my SIM card slot cover that you can only get to by removing the battery was
This
broken.
part, I really don't like her showing the build quality as a problem. Because she did get an unboxed phone. So you get what you get with unboxed. This is not a problem of Nokia. This is not a manufacturing issue. This is an open box issue. And the fact that she takes the battery out, I would have took this opportunity to say, hey, remember when we could replace our own batteries? How great this was. And speaking of that, the Lightphone 3 that I tested recently also has a removable back, and you can replace the battery, making your devices last a lot longer. But that's just me.
So this is, well, and I hadn't realized that the Lightphone 3 has a swappable battery.
Yeah, it has a removable
That is
back.
cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
I want to note those SIM trays, especially in older phones or even older Blackberries or things like this. These are notoriously fragile parts of the phone. It's very common for that part to break off. If somebody's extra rough trying to get their SIM cards out or something like that, they're just not built to last.
Agreed.
Upon unboxing.
Okay, we are not off to a great start here. Where is that supposed to go and why isn't it there?
This is a used open box device, and I think a normal person should bring it back to the store for repair, but
I mean, at least she calls that out, that it's a used device.
and I like a challenge,
And
so
at
I
least she
decided I'd
fixes
fix
it
it
herself,
myself.
so I give her credit for that.
Who knows
too.
how long it'll hold up,
Yep.
though, or how long this device will go without snapping in half at the expense of my friends having way too much fun
Why
flipping
are
it
people
open.
flipping the phone open like this? As an older person, I guess, I would never open my phone like this, and I don't remember us just whipping it open like that. I would
No,
flip
it's
it with
like
my finger, but not like whip it. That's crazy.
Yeah. I wonder maybe some of just I wonder, thinking back, how many of us, the first time we got a flip phone, maybe tried that, and then they were the norm
Broke
for
the
years and
hinges.
years and years. Yeah. Once we were like, hey, how many hinges do I have to break before I start to realize I don't have to, and just
Imagine doing this
just-
to your laptop, for example, just like whipping it open. It's just it's such a weird move for me to have all of these. I'm guessing younger people who may not have been in that era of flip phones to open the device the same way.
It open. As nervous as I was to switch to a flip phone, I quickly remembered that this form factor was perfected long ago, and there's only a few things that make it harder to use in 2025.
It's a little small and a little slow, but listen,
which is
I'll
kind of
take
the
it.
point.
For starters, this phone is like every flip phone I grew up with. And using it, it's like riding a bike. A really slow, rusty bike. And nowhere is that more obvious than texting. It's T9, you only got 9 keys. And it's definitely slower than using a full keyboard.
Again, just for the viewers, this is kind of a big part of the point of intentional tech. Like these design choices are made purposefully to add a little bit of a layer of friction or pushback when using your device to make it a little bit less appealing to use. It's intended to help you give in less likely to some of these addictive tendencies or whatnot. So this is, and we'll talk more about this later, but this is one of the things where they are pointing out a negative about a device that is 100% a huge reason behind why that feature was chosen for the device.
Yeah, and as far as T9 was concerned, this is why a lot of abbreviations came to be in texting and things like this, because we wanted to save time, of course, when we're texting. And if you're trying to text out full thoughts or feelings, it's better off just to call. And I think that's the purpose of using these devices, can this just be a short call? Do I need to send this message? And it's supposed to make you think and be intentional with how you're using your tools.
Exactly. Yep. And that's, I think, a great point is a lot of people, these initialisms or acronyms or whatever, they just use them, but they don't necessarily realize, no, this is from T9. This is from the T9 days.
Exactly.
Never wish for a device to have voice to text more than this thing. Holy cow, that would make it so much quicker and easier. I also really wish it was RCS compatible, as group messaging has been nearly impossible.
Dang, I don't think I'm getting anybody's messages.
Although folks have gotten my messages, I rarely receive messages back in a group message.
Okay. RCS.
I have a lot of questions about this for you, Jake, especially being in the US.
So before, real quick, let me say.
How does it work? Why are the messages not showing up? Do you know what could be causing this issue?
So I am not an expert. I'm not a developer, whatnot, but I do have some experience with RCS. I think the reason, because I've run into something similar myself as I've swapped phones, is if you don't turn off RCS before you swap phones, it's still on their servers, on the Google servers, it will still keep receiving RCSs that are sent to you, group texts or not. And so when those are sent, they just...
So it's connected to the device rather than the SIM card.
It's connected. The way I understand it is it's in the Google servers, and then it relays the messages to your device. Whereas SMS, which is what this uses, it uses just that old where it goes directly from device to device over whatnot. Yeah. So I'm guessing, because again I've run into this, if she would have turned off, and maybe she did, I don't know, maybe she's having some other issue, but because this is so similar to an issue I've run into specifically with one of my work group chats, if she would have turned off RCS before the swap, then Google would not have been receiving all of the messages to forward, and they would have just come straight to her. Again, that is my understanding of what. I'm not an expert. Folk, if this is wrong, please tell us in the comments. Like, I don't want to be doing the same.
I don't know anything about RCS. We don't really use it too much in Europe. We use a lot of WhatsApp for communication. So RCS is like a non-issue.
Right. And yeah, for people, RCS, I believe it stands for Rich Communication Services. It's basically Google/Android's implementation of an iMessage type platform. And then I think last year it was Apple themselves integrated RCS into iMessage. So you get read receipts. You can send high quality pictures and videos, whereas with an MMS, so
you can't.
I just wanted to call this out here because, again, this isn't necessarily an issue of the phone. I think it's an issue where she probably forgot or didn't know she needed to turn off or disable RCS before she swapped.
And I can confirm that folks were trying to get in touch with me, because when I put my SIM card back into a phone that does have RCS,
SIM cards are so tiny.
All of those messages came down from the ether.
Yep, and then they all come down from Google. Yep.
But it has made texting.
Speaking from experience,
like this,
I can see.
Pretty impossible when it comes to group chats.
In individual messages, though, you can open links and save media, which is helpful, but also you'll be viewing that media and opening those links on a 2.7-inch screen. All of those texting drawbacks just led me to calling people more, which I love.
Calling people on the phone. Efficient, easy, wonderful. We love hearing people's voices.
Now, I am glad that she calls this out, because this is...
Yeah.
I was hoping...
It's a good moment. Yeah.
People, call your friends and family.
They will appreciate it. Yeah, it's nice to hear people's voices.
There is one crucial feature that makes this phone actually workable for me, though. And I'm not talking about the Dad Jokes app that I downloaded via the ad and early 2000s mobile game-filled iOS App Store, or Snake, which obviously this phone came preloaded with.
Like they wanted you to.
No. It's
Google Maps. It's amazing. It is amazing to have Google Maps.
Holy cow, do I love and rely on Google Maps. And I love having it.
GPS on devices. In my Discord recently, we were talking about using a GPS every day on your phones and things like that. And I just have the question is, do we need GPS all day, every day? I know some people, of course, do. It's part of their job. They're traveling, they're driving an Uber, and they really need to know where they're going. But the average person like myself, I don't need GPS every day. I can do the check and look where I need to go before I go somewhere. But it's just, I don't know, breaking that habit, I guess. And for me, this is not a selling point for a dumb phone.
Right.
I can find workarounds.
Well, and I think that for folks in the data privacy, or they don't want their data to be harvested. I mean, GPS data is huge for these, companies seeing where you are, where you've been, to be able to create profiles on you.
Targeted ads when you walk into a store.
Yep.
Why are you receiving those
exactly
text messages when you walk into a specific store? This is why.
So there's that side of it. But then, yeah, I agree. There's also the side of it of using your phone or spending time on your phone for something that you don't really need. For me, my routine is very much the same. And so I can get to where I need to go. But I do, for that real-time traffic data, there have been times that has taken me from not inadvertently going the same route that I always do and spending an extra hour in traffic unknowingly. So, but I hadn't really considered like just looking at the traffic like on my computer before I leave.
The traffic reports
this is good.
Or the radio.
See, I'm learning.
That's very helpful too.
Oh yeah, radio's a thing. I forgot about.
Yeah.
Lightphone 3 used a different map service that was fine, but I just didn't know it as well. Other notable features of the Nokia phone are Bluetooth compatibility, FM radio abilities that I actually couldn't get to work, a 5 megapixel camera that could take both photos and videos, and of course, the small form factor. Though when it's flipped open, it is incredibly tall. I mean, look at this thing next to my face. It looks insane. So for under $100, this flip phone is a very easy way to test out the minimal lifestyle, so long as you don't really care about group messages. But if you have a little bit more money, there is another minimal device that's getting a lot of attention lately, and it's cheaper than this one, a little bit more expensive than this one, and I thought I'd give it a try. This is the $400 minimal phone.
On to the main event.
It's the second most popular minimal device next to the Lightphone 3.
We're all waiting for here.
It'll be launching this
is.
summer. I was lucky enough to have one sent to me by Minimal free of charge, though.
Before we go further, these shots of the shiny screen.
This
is the question I had straight away when I saw it. Is the screen shiny, or is there a screen protector on the device?
So the device ships with a screen protector that is, I don't think it's necessarily intended to be like an end user screen protector. I think it's just but what people do is they'll just like get some tweezers and take off the little pull tab, and then they'll just use it as a screen protector. It's kind of hard. There's definitely going to be some reflection at the right light angle. And mine does not have it. The person that I purchased mine from had removed that. And so I would say it's kind of in between. It's not a matte, like whatever the screen itself is made out of. It's not super matte, which I think could have been an improvement, or even just picking up a matte screen protector would be probably something that I end up doing with this. But in her case, and maybe it's just because of the camera, I don't know. It does look a little bit severe. Like the way...
Yeah, it looks very shiny from the shots. Some of the shots, not all the shots, but some of the shots she has.
Now, Laura, did you know that the Minimal phone is the second most something? I'm wondering, where is she... Like, she made this statement, and I was like...
Where's this data coming from?
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, so Minimal...
As somebody who's in the digital minimalist sphere or the intentional tech sphere, this is news to me.
Exactly.
I honestly had no idea that the Minimal phone was the second most popular device in the sector.
Well, especially considering it and the Lightphone 3, which she says is the number one, are both still in pre-order. I mean, neither of them have even gone to...
Yeah, they're not officially released. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, so she made this comment, and I was like... Oh, that's news to me. I don't. Where are you getting your data, Becca?
And it'll be launching this summer. I was lucky enough to have one sent to me by Minimal free of charge. Though, as with every product that gets a proper review on my channel, this company has no say in what I do with the device or say about it. What's unique about the Minimal phone is that it's an Android device running Android 14, but out of the box, it has a stock Minimal launcher that limits the apps on your home screen.
True.
Not to mention, that screen is e-ink, and there's
Wrong.
physical keyboard too.
Yeah, this is where I just like go into a rage of it's not e-ink.
Right.
And for her to get this incorrect in her influence and sphere of tech knowledge is almost shocking to a point for me. I could not believe it. She was the only influencer to call it out as e-ink, and it's not. It's e-paper.
Right. So for people not familiar, e-paper, the way I describe it is sort of the broad generic. That's the That's the, like, to use another analogy, that's the bandage. You know, you get a cut, you put on a bandage. That's just the generic, the baseline.
Yeah.
This is what it is. This is what it does. E-ink,
like a tissue versus a Kleenex.
Exactly. You've got the generic, you've got the actual thing itself, or the technology itself.
Yeah.
But then e-ink would be like the Kleenex or the Band-Aid. It is a proprietary name brand version of the thing that is much so, and she talks about it in a couple other places, and she's saying, but this is the good old e-ink that we know and love, and look how terrible this is.
This technology, this is really not. And if you're comparing this device to a flagship e-ink device, you will have a different experience. And the experiences that she is claiming is an e-ink problem is not an e-ink problem. This is just an e-paper issue on certain devices.
Right.
Not all devices.
Right.
E-ink, and there's a physical keyboard too. The idea is that you can have all of the typical smartphone tools, such as RCS, Google Maps, even social media apps if you want,
There's
plus
that
WhatsApp,
RCS
but you have to look
message
at it
again.
on an e-ink screen that doesn't
Right.
encourage you to keep mindlessly using it. And I can tell you that it works, because this screen is so infuriating that I never want to look at it. Unlike LCD or OLED displays, ink has physical tiny black and white particles within each pixel that change based on what's on
the zoom in of the text. I'm sorry. It's a bit much. You will see any fault in any screen if you zoom in this much, but especially to e-paper, that's really doing it a disservice. And I think that's not the user experience you're going to be looking at. As somebody who's visually impaired and looks very close at their devices, I've never been this close to my device to see the pixel breakdown, the physical particles of my e-paper display. This is a bit dramatic, I find.
Well, and I think, again, especially when you combine that to the fact that she is portraying this as an e-ink experience, as opposed to the generic e-paper panel that they went with on this. And the other thing, too, going back to...
If you go into an e-ink display like the Mudita Compact, it will be a much more crisp experience.
Yep.
As far as the tech edges are concerned for the physical parts. But again, if you're zooming in this close on any e-paper or e-ink device, it's just not realistic.
Another thing I wanted to kind of bring up again is she portrays this very much from her sphere's worldview. So whereas I'm sitting here like, well, but this is for people that are wanting to be encouraged by the very hardware itself to spend a little bit less time looking at something. What she's viewing as another problem is, no, it's different, but in many ways it's better for the person.
This is a positive.
Exactly.
what's on the screen. And to clear the screen, ink displays often flash or invert every particle's color. The problem is, in this phone's current state, it gets stuck refreshing, and it goes into what's called disco mode.
Okay.
This is like
Nope. Okay.
Have some things to say. And I think the disco mode, I first heard this term from AKA the Viking when he released the first minimal phone review. And I think since then we found the cause and the reason for this event. And there's also been there's a fix for it. I don't think it's happening anymore, but you can confirm this.
No, you're 100% right, Laura. What she is referring to is as disco mode is, I mean, she could just be using that herself generically, but there was, before some software updates, a very known issue that got nicknamed disco mode, where the display would start flashing, but also do so unresponsively. Like, there wasn't really anything that you could do about it without either turning off the screen or maybe even rebooting the device. But what she's referring to disco mode, this is simply she is watching dynamic content, high refresh content on the lowest refresh setting.
Yeah.
That's what in fact,
that'll happen on any e-paper device or even any e-ink device. This is gonna happen.
Right.
This is just how it is.
So I'm gonna just to give an example, and I am almost 100% confident that is what she's experiencing here, not disco mode, because again, that one was patched.
I felt like disco mode when AKA the Viking was showing it. He was trying to go into just any app at that point, and it started flashing.
Yep.
And that issue has been resolved.
Okay,
that's
so
not a mode of the device.
What I'm going to do here, okay, let's show the world more of me. So this is this right here.
So that's in low refresh
Exactly, and it looks exactly like what she's showing here.
Yeah.
It's just because it's on the lowest refresh rate. Now, if I come in...
And the same will happen on the Books Palma or any other e-paper or e-ink device. That's just the name of the game. It's designed not to be watching content on, and that's a positive element of the device. People getting this device are not going to be watching YouTube. That's really watchable.
Yeah. I mean, it's still
as an
it's still
addict, I would
jerky.
find that perfectly fine.
Exact. And it is still a little jerky. You know, you've got, you do have the limitations of the device, but yes, I feel like what she is referring to as disco mode is actually just because, and again, I wanted to say this because there are other parts of the video where she has dynamic content playing on the screen where it's very obvious that she had changed it to the high refresh mode.
Yeah.
And so, folks, I mean, again, I don't represent
refresh
minimal,
modes
but
are very important.
yes, you have to credit where credit is due. And, you know, this is a criticism, I think, more of her just inexperience with the phone itself than the phone itself.
And an experience with e-paper and e-ink as well. I think this is a clear thing, whereas other influencers like Marquise Brownlee did a review on the books Palma, so he can relate his experiences a little bit more closely after testing these devices. These are not having enough friction for somebody who is really in a bad state for digital minimalism or digital intentionalism. Somebody who is addicted to YouTube, I know myself, I can get into that terrible loop. This would not cause enough friction for me, even the minimal phone. If it was that flashing mode that she portrays, I think that would be convincing, and I would say, hey, maybe this device would be perfect for me because I obviously can't watch YouTube on it.
Mm-hmm. So maybe just
people will find out how to change the refresh, and then they'll say, "Oh, actually, I can get by quite well on this and lose my time."
Yes. Becca, I think this was an issue more with the setting you had turned on, not necessarily with the e-paper panel itself.
Mode. This is like seizure-inducing.
In my few days of testing, this disco mode has happened multiple times each day.
Blinking.
Many unbearable moments later.
I turn the screen
now,
on and
this is something, sometimes it will get confused, and even when you've changed it to the high refresh to the ultra, it will revert to the slower one until you do a panel refresh with the. So this here that she, and I'm sure she didn't even realize that this was what was happening, but having used mine for a couple of weeks, I have had this happen a couple of times where it would inadvertently switch to that slower. But and again, people, why would you ever use the slow refresh? Well, because it's also much crisper. The images that do display are much crisper than on the high refresh mode. But I did want to call out here.
And doesn't it save battery as well to use a lower refresh rate in general?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. With e-paper and e-ink devices, the reason you get such good battery life typically is because of how much less resource drain the screen has because of the nature of the technology. However, it's the exact opposite if you use it for dynamic content, as you had said. It drains it really quick.
Turn the screen on and off, and now it is not blinking anymore.
And then on my last day, a whole new bug was introduced.
All right, I'm just sitting here editing, minding my business. This phone is...
And I think she's missing the point as well by going through all of these specific applications of the point of the device. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to get people off of these specific applications. You're not supposed to be using this device like you would a normal smartphone, like an Android or an iPhone. And I think she's trying to implement it as such. And that's where she's feeling more friction than necessary, because if she had looked into the device further or looked into the company, even their website, they say this. They give the stats of how long people spend on their devices and how they're trying to help people reduce that. And going into these applications that people normally use, this device is not designed for that.
I 100% agree. This is, I mean, she's kind of reviewing it for people who it's not meant for, meaning
why isn't she going into the reading experience or something that would actually be beneficial, or the writing experience? Like, look, I've been writing all these documents or these emails, and I find like this has improved some of my productivity without distracting me on Instagram or something like that.
It's up next to me, like I usually have all of my phones, and it just won't stop flashing.
Now, this is another...
Instead, it's just pointing out the flashing all the time. Like, I'm just like, okay, we get it.
Yep. Now, I have had a similar... there are some bugs with the turning on the display when you don't necessarily expect it to turn on. So, for example, I was listening to an ebook, and I was like, that's weird. Why does the screen keep just randomly turning on if I'm just listening to something in the background? So I thought, well, maybe it's because it's an e-reader app, and so I did it with Spotify, and it would do the same thing. Every couple of seconds, the screen would turn on, flash once, twice maybe, and then go off. And so I think that's not to say it's a perfect device. The software has a long way to go. And this is one instance where I have had a similar glitch, and I don't know what causes it.
And to be honest, I have e-ink devices, and they will randomly refresh on their own as well. I have devices that don't have a light on it per se, so my Supernote Nomad will refresh its screen every so often, even when it's on wallpaper mode or something like this. So it does happen with e-ink as well. And the fact that she's pointing it out and not saying like, look, like, it's just how these devices are run. They run to refresh automatically after a certain point of time. This is a normal thing. The thing that I find that's not normal is that the light comes on with the refresh.
Exactly.
So I think that
it
could
seems
be
like
fixed
it's exactly
in a software.
Flashing as this device was doing, I expected ghosting or that faint visibility of a previous image to be non-existent. But this is e-ink technology as we have always known it, and there is plenty of ghosting. Luckily, there is a physical button on the side of the phone that refreshes a screen, and this does get rid of anything that's left behind. Another e-ink problem is lag, which is why Minimal included a physical keyboard.
Okay, real quick. Another e-ink problem, she says. I could very much say another e-ink benefit is lag, because this is one of the reasons that I find
it's supposed to slow you down.
Exactly.
Life is supposed to be slower. Enjoy the moment.
Now again, she
There's
called
no
it e-ink
rush.
when
What are
it's
you going to do with
e-paper.
all that extra time?
Yeah, exactly. So just again, this going more towards the they don't quite understand the
they're
draw.
not getting it.
Keyboard, and it's very nice to have. But it is a bit funny to navigate. There have been times when I can't get the symbol or alt.
Another point I wanted to say is, I know one of the founders, Andre, said that he leaves his backlight off a lot of the time if he doesn't need the backlight. This also helps the battery, of course, but this also helps just the appearance of the e-ink and things like this. So I noticed is that she's always having the light on, and even in well-lit conditions, daylight or something like this, you shouldn't need a backlight in daylight, for example. So this could also really help your experience with the device. Maybe it would be less blinking with the light on too while it's sitting on a desk if she just had the backlight off.
A great point, Laura. And I almost never use the backlight. I only use it when I literally can't see the screen for exactly the reasons that you have said. Now this is something I'm going to actually go back maybe a couple seconds here. This is something I want to point out. Okay.
Which is why Minimal included a physical keyboard.
Lists.
And it's very nice to have.
It just says that every shot is a
bit
list.
funny to navigate. There have been times when I can't get the symbol or alt button to work, so I can't use parentheses or
The
quotes.
symbol or alt button to work. Okay. So what she's running into here, and this is something that I've run into as well. There is I would call it a glitch. I don't know if there's a proper term for it, but for example, with the key 2, when you enter a text input field, it will automatically put your cursor there, and it will open the keyboard software. Here, it looks like the cursor is there because it's blinking and you can input text, but it actually isn't there. The on-screen keyboard software that is what runs being able to use the voice input, being able to use the alt button, being able to use the symbol or the emoji. It hasn't activated. So right here, if she simply would have tapped by China right
field
there, it would have activated it, and everything would have. It did take me a while to figure this out because I noticed the same thing. Like, how come I can put in text, but this is simply because the keyboard software didn't activate, and so she just needed to tap there, and then it wouldn't have been a problem.
Or quotes. And the keys are so very tiny with no sort of concave to them that it makes it hard to push directly on the center of the key and easy to hit the key next door. Every day that I've spent texting on this keyboard, I've gotten...
Okay, this is a problem she's describing that I do not have with this device. I worried that I would when I noticed that the keycaps were flat and small. But I have really large hands, and maybe some of it's because I was kind of a lifelong BlackBerry user. But what she is describing here of not being able to push directly or it not, I'm a fat fingered dude that does not have this problem with the device.
It's sausage finger approved.
Yes, it is.
I haven't heard one negative thing from people who do use a lot of keyboards and have the experience with using keyboards. I haven't heard anything negative about the typing experience. So that says a lot because the typing experience can be very subjective and people have opinions of their favorite devices they like to type on. And honestly, I've heard a lot of people say the key travel is excellent on this device.
Yes. The only hardware related complaint I have is some of the symbols that I use a lot, like parentheses, for example, you have to pull up the symbol pop-up and tap it. So I think that was just one where it was like, maybe swapping out one that I don't use that much. I don't know.
Can you remap the keys? Is that a possibility? Can you?
I think that you not out of the box, like it doesn't come with any key mapping software built in, but I think that if you downloaded one of the key mapper apps, I just don't have any experience with that, but I don't know why it wouldn't work. Maybe I'll try that. Like, again, this is going to sound like a broken record here, but the biggest issues with the minimal phone are software. The hardware issues are pretty much non-existent, or the hardware issues, the hardware problems, as Becca has kind of referred to some of them, are not problems at all. They are features that are greatly appreciated. So the software, I think that the Minimal company has a really, really awesome device. I mean, and it's their first device as well. Like I think that in the device side, they're off to a great start. In the software side, needs some improvement. In the comms, the communication side needs a lot of improvement. I mean, they've admitted as such themselves. So,
of course, yeah.
Day that I've spent texting on this keyboard, I've gotten slightly faster and more accurate with it, but there has definitely been a learning curve. Continuing the hardware talk, you have USB-C, a headphone jack that you can plug headphones into to receive FM radio signal. I love this.
Peak technology. Peak technology.
A fingerprint reader, and a very unreliable 16 megapixel camera around back. Sometimes you get this, and sometimes you get this. What is this?
This is something I also inexplicably encountered. I mean, I don't know if it is in the software side or the hardware side, but the rear camera is very inconsistent. And I know lighting can affect it sometimes. In fact, even looking at these two shots right here.
I can't see what she's pointing out here exactly because, again, I'm visually impaired. So bad photo, good photo to me doesn't really make much of a difference.
I think it's because this these weeds, whatever. It's kind of, but yeah, I noticed it. I did notice this, that the rear camera would be kind of inconsistent. The front camera,
and that's a software issue probably that could be addressed. I think
that's my impression from using it as well.
The same happened for the Mudita Compact. I think they have a great component, but it just needs to be optimized a bit more from the software side.
Better.
Gotcha.
On the front, there's a 5 megapixel selfie cam.
I always say that my favorite season is the next season,
And
but
again, I want to reiterate, people looking to purchase these devices or use these devices are not looking to get all of the same experiences out of a smartphone. So if you're going into this device expecting to shoot movie quality videos or the best photos of your kids you've ever taken, this is not the device for you. And you should probably get a dedicated camera if that's something that's really important to you.
My understanding, and I don't know if I've read this anywhere or heard Andre or Armin at Minimal Company say this, but the cameras on the Minimal phone, they basically were if we're going to bring a device to market, it has to have these or no one is going. In fact, in some place, like I know initially they hadn't wanted to include a front-facing camera, but
no, it was supposed to be an option. It was supposed to be an option. If people wanted it, they could get that option, but they didn't want the phone by default to have one. But I think in the end they had to.
Yep.
And Becca's going to be extra harsh on the camera aspects because this is her specialty. She's a very good videographer, and I think when she was working at The Verge, she did a lot of in-depth reviews of cameras on specific devices. So this is her expertise and her wheelhouse to say. So she's going to have a little bit more feedback than the average tech reviewer on this aspect.
So this kind of strikes a nerve maybe.
I almost wish it recorded in black and white 8-bit-esqueness. It really looks cool.
And wireless charging for the 3000 milliamp hour battery. But when I had the phone on the wireless charger, my home button was working maybe 50% of the time. So I took it off the charger and it worked. And then I put it back on the charger and it didn't work.
I had a question about this. Have you tested wireless charging? I don't have a wireless charging station. I don't use wireless charging. So I'm just wondering how big of an issue is this for the average user?
So I would say two things. I'm glad you brought this up because I did want to comment on this as well. One, I don't. I have one wireless charger. It's at my on my desk at my office, my work office. And even then, I use it mostly just as a display stand. I don't usually even have it plugged in. So I can't really maybe
Yeah.
in my forthcoming real world review of the minimal phone, I'll try and remember to include that. But she did this, and
Okay.
I was like, Becca, who uses their device while it's on the wireless charger? I mean, I'm sure some people do, or if you're in a bind, but I'm like,
I would say maybe she should go back to the Lightphone for a bit to kind of break her tie to her devices,
Right.
and to really take a step back and realize where her priorities are. Because myself, I would never use a device on a wireless charger. I would pick it off the device, use it in my hands, and then put it back on.
yep, this was an interesting, I was like, do people do this? This is an interesting complaint I wasn't expecting. Now, one thing I did want to call out here that she says is battery life. This is another one where it is going to vary so much depending on your use case. I mean, I've seen some people reporting, one person on Twitter said, I'm 4 days in and I still have X amount of battery life. And I was like, oh my gosh, what? Because using it, I was like, the only way he could have done that would be if it's only calling and texting, and maybe only texting, you know, I don't. And sure enough, someone asked, well, how are you? And he's like, exactly the way the company intended. I'm using it minimally. But yeah, if you do what she is showing here in the video, if you're using it like a regular smartphone, you're probably going to get worse battery performance than a regular smartphone because it's not designed for this. So,
And I think this is with any phone. I used the Mudita Compact, and they said by standby time you could get 6 days, but I don't use my phone as a normal person would anyway. I just use it for calling and texting, and minimally at that. And I got a week and a half. So anyone, depending on your use case, can extend what the battery is intended to be or not be, depending on your use.
Yep.
And using it clearly for dynamic content, Spotify, navigation, the whole works of a normal smartphone, you're not going to get much battery life on any device. I'm going to put that flat out there. It doesn't matter e-ink or what, it will drain. Like if you're connected to GPS, if you have Bluetooth running, there's so many factors that go into the battery life that we're just not hearing
restricting your
from
apps.
her side.
This is something I also want to test in
refresh in the background, which apps are using Google services, because that's really going to drain everything.
And it didn't work, and then it did work. Either way, the battery life isn't great. I'm getting maybe a day of use out of this thing. Overall, I love the idea of this device, but in its current state, it is so damn buggy that, man, it doesn't just deter me from using it. It makes me never want to use it.
It is buggy. It is better. It is leagues ahead of where it was at launch, which we could talk about that in and of itself, but it is. I will be the first to admit that there are still software fixes that they need to implement very, very badly.
I think there's supposed to be a big update coming out in June. And so there's been a lot of people saying, if you're going to get this device, wait till after that update and maybe see what happens and how the improvements will roll out. So I think anybody watching this video in particular and is curious about the minimal phone, maybe wait and see how many of these issues will be addressed and how much more seamless or fluid the experience will be.
It at all. Now, I've seen the folks from Minimal comment on other YouTube videos about this device, claiming that they're working hard on all sorts of fixes. But to Minimal, I say, if you have to make all those comments and promises, then you should have just waited to ship this to reviewers.
Laura, I do not disagree with her here. I do think that they jumped the gun a little bit, just broadly with now I understand there's a lot of factors, and they need to build hype, and they need to show that they're not just a vaporware company, you know, like I understand all of that, but this comment in particular, I'm like, if you're going to send this out for the world to have broadcasting about it, you want to make sure that thing is polished, that is in a really Like, I don't know if you have any comments
especially
on
to
that.
people who don't understand digital minimalism or intentional tech. If you're sending it out to the average tech YouTuber, they're not going to understand what this device is designed for and what kind of company this is, what's possible with these kinds of devices, because they're so used to touching the most polished devices, having all of the marketing material handed to them and spoon-fed to them. And this is not the same experience for these reviewers. So they're going to be more harsh on that because they're coming up with things out of their head at this point. And they're not used to having devices that aren't fully polished and fully finished. And even with the Lightphone 3, there's a lot of features that weren't available at the release, especially to the reviewers. And I think the reviewer themselves should have this in mind and give that as kind of a preface to the review, saying like, look, this is not the final product, and I've received this as a review unit, and there are some issues that will be addressed probably in future updates, so keep that in mind while I go through my review.
This funny thing happened last night when I was filming B-roll of it flashing uncontrollably. My partner said this.
It's crazy. It's like they got bored of making phones better, so they decided to try making them worse.
And she's right. Minimal has reintroduced so many problems that our smartphones have already worked to solve, which is why I think if you're looking to go minimal, start here.
A lot of feelings.
Yes. Would you like to start?
She's not the only tech reviewer to bring up this point. I think 9 out of 10 will say the same thing, that you can just use a phone you have and put a minimalist launcher on it, or remove the apps that are addicting. And if you're not someone who's addicted, this is a great solution. I think this is the best solution if you want to test out being intentional with your tech, or digital minimalism for that matter. But if you are an addict and you know you have a problem, and you realize that you're using your device way too often and many hours a day, and you realize that those the screen monitoring on your phone by default is not really stopping you, and you're re-downloading apps, this will not work. As coming from personal experience, when I first started my digital minimalism journey, I tried this. It didn't work. I would re-download apps. I would get off the launcher and get frustrated and just go back to using my phone like I was before. And if it were that simple, we wouldn't have so much addiction, especially with smartphones. So obviously it's not working.
Exactly. And I think that this is one where they totally are missing the point completely here. They've reintroduced so many problems that modern smartphones have long since solved, or whatever exactly that she says there.
Yeah.
I view it the complete opposite. They have introduced, in this case, hardware solutions to many problems that modern smartphones have caused. And this was, I was just like, oh, they don't. And again, I don't hold it against them. Like they're not in the intentional tech realm. And but at the same time,
they might have addictions themselves and just not aware of it. I mean, most people don't realize that I know myself, I went many years spending hours and hours a day on my phone, not realizing it was really a problem, until I started to look at that time and add it up and realized the average person loses 37 days of their life a year on their phone. And most people can't account for that time. What did you do with that time? Was it productive? Most of it was social media. So,
and you're never getting the time back, Laura. You're
no,
never getting
and that's time you could spend with your family, with your children especially. I think a lot of these people are quite young. They don't have families or see that time is precious. And especially when you have health issues or people in your family that you're no longer with, you might regret not spending that time with those people. And that makes me sad when I realize the time I've lost.
And this is actually, Laura, where I'm going to, where she talks about just take your phone and make it so that it doesn't distract you. This is where I'm just going to stop it, because this is one where, again, not only...
This is not healthy.
No, but it also shows that they, to your point earlier, they're kind of completely overlooking this huge group of people curious about, or even potentially needing the benefits of intentional tech. They're just completely ignoring the addiction side of it.
Yeah.
And so...
Addiction's an ugly word. People don't want to confront it because, of course, it's associated with drugs or illicit activities. And addiction can be anything. You can be addicted to things that are good for you, whether that be exercise or even certain ways of eating and things like this. Anything taken to the extreme can be an addiction, and I think we need to address it as such. And if we're not going to talk about addiction and smartphone use, we're never going to be able to conquer it and be more intentional and solve the issues that we want to solve as a society.
I agree. And I think that it does, again, I don't want to seem like I'm just attacking all of these influencers, but it's like the old... the old Spider-Man adage, with great power comes great responsibility, with great massive amounts of influence comes an added
Yeah.
duty to make sure, I think, that you are giving good information, accurate information, even if you don't necessarily come from the same angle that a lot of people are approaching intentional tech.
I kind of take it as consideration. Cigarette companies, for example, they were prominent in media for so many years, and even doctors were promoting them. And if you're having somebody who's promoting something that is not healthy, such as smartphones and things like this, they're not going to come from the right point of mind, because they are backed, paid for, and sponsored, and everything that their livelihood is depending on these companies. So I'm not expecting them to come out and say, like, look, smartphones are an issue and could be causing a lot of problems for younger people, older people, and could be causing attention problems. But you do need to take a step back and say, look, like, maybe there is an issue here, and maybe I should start looking at how I work with certain companies, and do those companies have our best interest in mind, and not just look at me, how I use my devices, and my audience probably uses the devices the same way. I think we just need to look at it as a global issue, and it's really hard for an influencer, I think, to take a step back and really look at society as a whole.
And I think I agree. I totally agree. And I don't think that I can't really fault them for making content that they are interested in making for their audience that have their own interests and stuff. But I do think if you're going to consider some of these other devices, this sounds really harsh, but like, at least get your facts straight.
And it's a bit of a rage bait to title your video "Are Minimal Phones a Scam?" or "Minimalist Phones a Scam?" I mean, you're kind of setting the audience up to fight with everything that you review in that video, because you obviously have an issue with minimalist devices. Otherwise, you wouldn't have titled it this way, unless you're creating clickbait, which you probably are too. But that's a whole nother discussion about how the YouTube algorithm works. And by using negative phrasing in your titles and things like this does get higher engagement. So you need to keep this in mind when you're watching these type of videos. This is generated to improve the income for that particular individual. So take it with a grain of salt.
Exactly. Well, Laura, thank you so much for joining me today. I'll put links to everything in the description, but any parting message you have for my viewers, where folks can find you, maybe what you've got going on over in the Laura Malvoyante sphere world?
Laura Malvoyante. We're expanding every day. We have an excellent Discord that Jake is also a part of, and I just released a podcast called Blind Spots, and I tried to go into depth a little bit more on subjects like this matter, and for example, using tech intentionally, of course, even Apple products or things like this, it can be done, but you have to be very intentional about not only the device itself, but of course the software aspects. And I think this is a big takeaway to take from this video and any video you're watching in tech. Just be intentional. Really think about what's behind the tech itself. Who's designing it, which applications, which companies are on that phone, and really take it step by step. And eventually you'll get to a happy balance, hopefully, with how you use your devices.
I agree. And thank you for taking the time to make such great content, folks. Go over to her channel. She's got so much great stuff. In fact, many things that I found introducing me into this space are from Laura's channel. So thanks for being an intentional tech pioneer. And let's do this again sometime. This was fun.
Yeah.
Thanks
for having me.
Thanks, Laura.